Welcome back, scholars, to our Digital Academy. I am Professor Spark. Whether we are turning the pages of a timeless novel, our mission remains the same. Will today's sweep us into the concert hall? Let's find out together.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking on an absolute giant, James Joyce's 1922 masterpiece, Ulysses. Now, we all know its reputation, right? It's famously known as the greatest novel that nobody has actually read. It's this notoriously intimidating classic that just sits unopened on millions of bookshelves. Honestly, it was even banned for obscenity in several countries for years. But if you look past that formidable reputation, you're going to find a story about profound, beautiful, everyday humanity. So, we're going to demystify this book right now. We'll explore exactly how Joyce takes one single, seemingly mundane day and completely transforms it into a profound epic. Okay, let's jump straight into our roadmap for today. We've broken this complex giant down into 5 easy-to-follow sections: the modernist epic, 3 ordinary heroes, a plotless journey, themes of everyday life, and finally, the final affirmation. Section 1. The modernist epic. Ordinary life as epic. When you hear the word epic, you probably picture classic stories, like Homer's Odyssey, right? You know, bloody battles, grand seafaring adventures, larger-than-life mythical gods. Well, Joyce's reality totally flips the script. His setting isn't a chaotic battlefield. It's just Dublin, Ireland, on a completely unremarkable Thursday, June 16th, 1904. A date so famous now that fans literally celebrate it every single year as Bloomsday. The whole novel is just packed with ordinary events and regular people trying to get by. By mapping the grand structure of an ancient, world-shaking epic onto a modern, mundane city, Joyce is pushing a really radical idea here. He's showing us that the inner lives of regular folks walking down the street have the exact same richness, the same complexity, and the same absolute significance as ancient wars fought by Greek gods. Moving into Section 2. 3 ordinary heroes. Dublin's main trio. To really get this modern epic, we have to meet the 3 distinctly unheroic but beautifully flawed people who anchor the whole thing. So instead of traditional warriors with swords and shields, Joyce gives us 3 deeply relatable modern minds. First up is Stephen Daedalus. He's this grieving young guy, completely paralyzed by intellectual doubt and feeling totally spiritually isolated after his mother's death. He basically represents the restless intellect. Then we meet the true central figure, Leopold Bloom. Bloom doesn't physically dominate anybody. Instead, he just completely embodies compassion, empathy, and this insatiable curiosity about the world. He's a lonely, endlessly observant Jewish advertising salesman who is literally just trying to make it through his day. And finally, we have his wife, Molly Bloom. She fiercely embodies physical life, emotional honesty, and raw instinct. She actually spends her day at home contemplating her incredibly complex marriage and an impending affair. Section 3. A plotless journey. One day in Dublin. So you might be wondering, how does a massive book that notoriously lacks a dramatic central plot actually keep us hooked? Well, it's all about following these parallel, wandering journeys through a single day. Think about it. At 8 a.m., Stephen is just drifting through the city, teaching at a local school, philosophizing about art. By 1 p.m., we're deep inside Bloom's head as he works, goes to a funeral, and, quietly eats a cheese sandwich. For the whole afternoon, our 2 main guys unknowingly wander through the exact same city blocks. They keep almost bumping into each other. But it isn't until 10 p.m. that they finally, meaningfully meet. Bloom sees a drunk, exhausted Stephen and just offers some kindness and a place to sober up at his home. And then the day quietly wraps up at 2 a.m. with Molly lying awake in bed. There's no giant climax, no explosive final battle. It's just the natural fading rhythm of a long day coming to an end. Section 4. Themes of everyday life. The profound mundane. This tight single-day timeline actually serves a really specific purpose. It reveals the profound themes hidden right inside entirely ordinary actions. Honestly, Joyce's biggest achievement here is showing us that ordinary existence is where the real epic happens. Think about buying a kidney from the butcher, walking down a dusty street, skimming the newspaper headlines, or feeding a stray cat. Joyce rapidly elevates these everyday blink-and-you-miss-it flashes into moments worthy of the highest literature. He's arguing that these quick, ordinary events make up the actual bulk of our existence, and those quiet moments are completely worthy of being immortalized in art. Take a look at how Leopold Bloom's overlapping, fragmented existence perfectly visualizes our universal human struggle with identity. He exists somewhere in this messy middle ground. He's Jewish in a deeply Catholic Ireland. He's Irish, but his peers often treat him like a foreigner. He's a husband in a strained marriage and a father who has lost his son. He is perpetually navigating the spaces between all these labels, constantly feeling like an outsider in the very community he calls home. Which naturally brings us to a really fundamental question. Who am I? What actually defines your nationality, your religion, or your family when society's neat little labels just don't fit? Take a second and reflect on that yourselves. Have you ever felt like you didn't quite belong to the groups you were born into? Well, these are the exact, deeply relatable anxieties that Joyce's characters face as they navigate the streets of Dublin. At the very core of all this wondering is a profound sense of loss and a really desperate search for connection. Stephen has lost his mother, he's alienated his father, and he's just completely adrift. Bloom, on the other hand, lost his infant son Rudy years ago, and that tragedy fundamentally fractured his marriage and his heart. So each man is unconsciously seeking exactly what the other lacks. When they finally sit down together late at night over a simple cup of hot cocoa, they form this temporary, incredibly moving, surrogate father-son relationship. That quiet moment over cocoa literally becomes the emotional center of the entire novel. That brings us to another massive theme we run into: exile. But we aren't talking about physical banishment to a foreign land. We're talking about emotional alienation, even inside your own city. Think about a time you felt completely alone in a crowded room, or felt like a total outsider in your own hometown among people who supposedly know you. That's the emotional exile that Joyce is pointing at. He suggests it's something we all universally share. It's just an inescapable part of the modern human experience. And this internal alienation brings us to the really complicated realities of love and infidelity. Bloom knows full well that his wife Molly is having an affair with a brash guy named Blazes Boylan that exact afternoon. He actually spends hours agonizing over it. But here's the catch. Rather than blowing up with violent rage or seeking some kind of traditional epic revenge, Bloom reacts with sadness, eventual acceptance, and a deeply enduring affection for his wife. Joyce totally refuses to idealize marriage. Instead, he paints it as incredibly messy and complicated, having his modern hero respond to betrayal with ultimate humanity, pragmatism, and forgiveness. Throughout all of these present-day events, there's also the constant intrusion of memory. You know how your mind wanders when you're just trying to eat lunch? You get flashes of childhood, sudden pangs of grief, regrets about lost opportunities. Just as your own past constantly tugs at your present, memory continually interrupts the character's day in Ulysses. Through his pioneering stream of consciousness writing, Joyce proves that the past is never actually in the past. It's constantly bubbling up, fundamentally shaping our identities and our actions from one moment to the next. But beyond all that incredible somatic depth, we really have to talk about how Joyce plays with the very tool of human connection. He turns every single chapter into a playful, exhausting, entirely exhilarating celebration of language itself. He literally stretches the limits of English by adopting completely different styles as the day moves on. One chapter reads like cheap, sensational journalism. Another is formatted like an elaborate stage drama. Others parody boring legal documents, medieval romantic prose, or even super clinical scientific writing. It's an absolute linguistic tour de force that forces us to realize how the way we speak completely changes the way we see the world. Section 5. The Final Affirmation. Molly Bloom's Monologue. As the city goes to sleep and Bloom and Stephen part ways, we're left all alone in the dark with Molly. The book concludes with her 40-page interior monologue. And get this, it's famously written with almost zero punctuation. It's literally just 8 massive flowing sentences. Lying awake in the deep night, Molly's breathless stream of consciousness perfectly balances out the heavily male perspectives of the earlier chapters. She freely and instinctively reflects on her marriage, her deepest desires, the nature of men, aging, and motherhood. She just lets her uncensored thoughts bleed into one another in a truly stunning display of psychological realism. Which leads us straight to the very last words of the book. Yes, I said yes. I will. Yes. As Molly remembers the exact moment she agreed to marry Leopold all those years ago, the novel ends on literature's most famous, resounding affirmation of life. It wraps up an entirely ordinary, exhausting, sometimes painful day with profound, absolute acceptance. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with a question. As you go about your mundane tasks, your daily commutes, and your quiet lunches, how will you say yes and find the profound epic hidden in your own ordinary tomorrow?